Well, my first memories in the Church of God was the first General Assembly I attended in 1935. I was 4 months old, and I have a picture of my mother holding me in her arms in a big group picture. And I only remember that because of the picture. But I was raised in the church. My great-grandfather founded the East Chattanooga Church of God, which was the first Church of God in the Chattanooga area.
What was his name?
Francis Marion Cook.
Okay.
And it was in East Chattanooga. I remember growing up in that church. Back in my childhood, it was one of the largest churches in the movement. I remember worshiping in a frame building that they set on fire and burned. The church was rebuilding it and they set it on fire again. So that's where the stone church on Glass Street comes from. When they rebuilt, they built it out of stone. And I remember us going over to the junior high school behind the church and worshiping for a long time. So I grew up in the church. That's all I ever knew. I didn't join the church until I graduated from high school. And the reason for it, I couldn't play ball and be a member of the church. So I didn't join. That's some of the old days problems that we encountered.
And so when did you get saved?
Well, it's hard to say. You know how it is. These river rats, they go to the altar every time there's a revival. So I can't say exactly what it took, but I was always there, seeking the Lord and going to the altar. I sat under some of the greatest pastors in the Church of God. James L. Slay,
Cross.
E.M. Ellis,
Cross.
James A. Cross, T.R. Morris. T.R. Morris had the most profound effects on me. He's the one that convinced me not to go to a liberal college, but to come to Lee College. And we did.
Mm-hmm. And how old were you when you were called to preach?
I felt like as a teenager, that was my destiny. I could wake up sometimes seeing myself preaching. The first time I can remember that God really dealt with me in a strong way, they were showing a Christian movie at the church. The title of it was The Man Who Forgot God. And I can remember distinctly having a strong feeling that I needed to get into the ministry during that setting.
And how old were you then?
I would have been 15 or 16 years old, maybe 14. Now that I'm 86, it's a little hard to date all of those things exactly.
So Pat, tell us when your first memories of the church. And
Actually, my story goes back to a little country church in South Georgia, Piney Grove, out from Jessup, Georgia, Odom, Georgia. And my folks went to the church. They were Methodists at that time, but my aunt led them into the Holiness Church. And my memories there are of when I was in the 3rd grade there, and I had a little schoolhouse across from over where the little church was. And I remember very distinctly both of my grandmothers went to that church, and I've seen them shout down those aisles in that church. I wouldn't take anything from those memories there. And so I was like that. Like he said, you know, you're in the church so much, so you know you don't really know the point that you got saved. It just kind of, you know, took, you know, like a vaccination. But I remember so many good things there. We went to the church. My dad went to. We moved to Savannah.
And your dad was?
J. Paul Delk, and he went in service. That's what put us there at Piney Grove for my 3rd grade year there. But like I said, I had the privilege of seeing both of my grandmothers at those times, you know, blessed beyond in the Spirit of the Lord move on them. And then in Savannah, P.H. Hammond was our pastor, and we were there. Then my dad went into the ministry in 49, and then we started, moving around. But I do remember more than getting saved, the baptism of the Holy Spirit, because my aunt, Minnie Irene Hillhouse, was in revival with us. And I'd gone down every night seeking, and she come up to me one night and she said, "Patricia, you are making this far harder than you need to make this. God is not pleased with you acting like this." And said, "So you pray to Him, and then you let the Spirit of the Lord come upon you," and He did. And that's how many years ago has that been? I was 16. My dad was pastor in Hartwell. And he's been one of the best comforters, and I'd recommend, him to anybody. Yeah.
So when did you guys meet? How did you meet? When did you get married?
We met here at Cleveland at Lee. I was entering my second year, and she was a new student first year. The funny thing about it, we both sneaked off from school. We didn't know each other, and met over at the Church of God of Prophecy General Assembly on the street, buying snowballs or whatever it was they were selling. And she had on a black velvet top, a white collar, and a black skirt, and white hair. I looked and I said, "Boy, I'd like to know that girl, but I probably can't get acquainted with her because she's not Church of God."
Yeah, that well. I thought
And
the
then I
same
saw her
thing.
at the lunchroom at Lee the next day. And so that's where it started.
And mine was the same thing. I thought I could not bring somebody else to my family that's not Church of God. And so, anyway, but then I found out, and we started talking, and then I got out a little earlier, and I would save him a place in the lunch line. And we both got demerits. He got demerits for cutting the line, to get lunch.
I got a letter from the president of
Yeah.
the school. And it said, "Your conduct on this campus is destroying the spiritual
And the
unity and
harmony.
harmony of the school." Now, we had 350 students total at that time.
Yeah.
Said, "It's reported to me that you've been cutting in line at the cafeteria, and if this continues, you're going to be sent home."
Home, yeah. So,
Who was the president?
Arlen or Carol?
Carol.
You still have that letter?
We do.
Yes, I do. My kids found it.
They
It's
found
been
it.
framed.
Yeah.
And Paul Kahn was at our home and saw it. He had a good laugh over it.
He said, "Oh, that we just had those kind of problems now,
That's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
So you guys, what year did you get married?
55.
55.
1955. And when did you start ministry?
Then, yeah.
Well, we started a revival the next week.
At Odom, Georgia, and that
Got
was our
married, had everything we owned was in the trunk of our car. We had one revival, but we weren't worried
We
about
were
it.
too silly to worry about it. So,
So were you an evangelist for a while?
Yes. And then in 56, we went to pastor in Little Rock, Arkansas. Big city, tiny church. Very tiny. But we were happy.
we lived, in fact, was it 2 blocks from where the troops were sent in, Governor Phobos, and the, the integration first, school,
Yeah.
whatever, central school.
There were thousands of troops there.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
school was about 4 square blocks, and they were standing abreast all the way around it. And they were patrolling the street we lived on. We couldn't sit on our porch or anything.
That was a sad picture, the little black girl, going
Yeah.
into the school. And
But the
Oh,
news media made
they
it worse
made
than
it,
it
they
was.
blew it out much.
Because I never saw any disruptions, but on the nightly news, they'd be showing different things, which I never saw, and I'd go up there every day to catch a bus to go to work.
So how long did you pastor in Little Rock?
2 years
2 years. And
Yeah.
then you moved
Well-
back to Georgia?
to evangelize.
My mom was having she had fallen and broken her shoulder and had to have major repair. and I needed to come home. I'm an only child, so I had to come home and help my dad, and you know, that was really the reason. But it, you know, what they say, everything I know I learned in kindergarten, everything you know real sweet about ministry and pastoring, you can learn in that first church. You know, you can learn good things, and we had some dear friends, Louise and J.Q. Richardson, and she was the state secretary for Arkansas for years, and she just passed away, but we made those friendships that have lasted, and faithful, dear people, you know.
So when did you move to Georgia when?
In 1957.
And pastored which church?
We evangelized for about a year. I wanted to pastor, and the state overseer called me and he said, I've got a church coming open. I've got another man and I got a place. I got 2 churches. One of them runs 150 and another one has 12 members. And God had whipped me enough, I was ready to go. I said, I'll take either one. Of course, we were assigned to the one with 12 at Milledgeville, Georgia. And we stayed there 5 years, met precious people.
Yeah. We had something there that really blessed us, because when he called the clerk, she was an elderly lady, and so he told her, he said, I've been appointed to your church, and my name's Robert Daugherty, and she said, my God, what a name, you know. So, but she turned out to be the sweetest, and she fed us. She had a little country store, and so she fed us out of that store for 4 years, our family, and
We ate good.
Yes, and I can't wait to get to heaven to see her and thank her again, because, I mean, you know, we couldn't have stayed there, you know, had it not been. And the other things, the places we pastored in South Georgia, as we look back, we could not have afforded the kind of food out of gardens, and the people that would take and say, you've got you've got a cow, you've got a hog, you've got everything you need, chickens and all down at the, you know, the, what do you call it, slaughterhouse, whatever, where they pack them, packing place. And I mean, our children ate healthy, you know, yeah.
So after Milledgeville, you went?
We went from Milledgeville to Gainesville, year and a half. Seemed like, well, we were there a year and a half.
I understand.
But then we went from there to Garden City.
Okay.
To Garden City in Savannah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the first church we had that we got a regular salary each week. But we knew what we were going to get.
There we went to Hazelhurst. And
That's where I remember you as
Yeah.
a child.
Yeah.
I remember.
We went to Hazelhurst in 1970.
And it was, we had a great ministry there, but it was that's the hardest adjustment I ever had, because a lot of the people were rural, and you know, for example, I'd go to a ladies' meeting, they wanted to know if I'd made that cake from scratch. Well, I hadn't. So I felt like I was denying the faith, you know, or something here. But I decided that if I'm going to be domesticated, it's going to be here, you know. And it was the best thing that happened to me. I mean, I learned to make biscuits, things that, you know, just really rounded me out, you know, and just helped me. And there was really blessed people.
The hardship was moving from Savannah, Georgia, into Hazelhurst with a population of 3,000. And that took a while for us to adjust. But God blessed us abundantly. My last year there, we averaged about 450 in Sunday school. And God just did it.
I have one story I'd like to share there that went into the focus on the family. And it was Christmas season, and it was Saturday afternoon, and I didn't like to start any big projects or anything, because I had to cook for the family, teach a Sunday school class, play the organ, you know, and you know what goes on. One of the little elderly ladies in the church called and said, I'm sick, Sister Daugherty, I need prayer, would you come pray for me? And so I said, well, Brother Daugherty will be back in just a few minutes, you know, and I'll get him. Said, I want you to come. And so here I am in the kitchen trying to get everything, and it was a little frustrating to me, because I'm not good with directions. Country directions and city directions are two different things, you know. So she told me that I'd go out a maintained road somewhere, you know, and that I would pass this cornfield and I'd go by somebody's old home place. How do I know whose old home place this is? So I get out there trying to find her place and wander around. Finally had to stop and ask someone, and then when I finally got there, went in, I knew that she had been sick with just the looks of it, but I have never seen a more stark, unfurnished, pitiful house than that. Then, since then, or now, you know, I mean since then. So I went in, and she sure enough was in the bed, and she had a cane-back chair was sitting there, and it was like a what is it, a rope mattress type thing, you know, and an old shaggy-looking quilt. But I sat down in the chair and visited with her a little bit, and then I told her, I said, well, we'll have prayer. And so after we had prayer, she said, Sister Daugherty, there is a brown bag on the table. It was a bare table, nothing on it, in the kitchen, and you get that as you go out. I wanted to make you a cake, but I got sick and I couldn't, and we loved you and Brother Daugherty and the children. So I picked up the sack and got to the car, and when I got in the car, curiosity was killing me, so I looked in that bag, and everything was stamped USDA, and I knew that this was her food stamp commodities. So my first thing was to run back in and tell her that I don't need this that bad, you know, but the Lord checked me as I started back in and said, just thank her. And when I went back in there and thanked her, again, she said, I'm sorry, but would you make a cake and tell the children it's from me? And I subscribed to the Southern Living magazine, and this cake was on the front of that magazine. It was a coconut cake. And I went home and I had everything in that bag that I needed, eggs, butter, and everything to make that cake. I made the cake, and now that's our favorite cake. I have made it for 40-something years.
Every Christmas.
Every Christmas. And I don't think I've ever been given a gift that costs quite that much. I've been given some nice gifts, but I think that is always at the top of my list.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So after Hazelhurst,
We went to Jessup. We were there 5 years, relocated the church, built what back then was one of the most modern buildings in the Church of God, and it's still modern looking.
Tell me about the process you got there.
Well, I'd had a dream in January that we moved and went to Jessup, Georgia. And so I visited our state overseer, and I told him, I said, if that church ever comes open, would you consider my name? He said, that church is not going to come open. The pastor's been there a long time and doing good. Well, about 4 months later, that pastor was out and gone. And I wasn't considered. I thought, now God, do I not know you well enough? I was disappointed, not that I didn't get to move, I was disappointed that I felt like I didn't understand what God was telling me. That night I had a dream, 3 specific dreams, and each one, I remember the details to this day. Something would come toward me and I'd reach for it and it would elude me. And I'd stop and a second item would come and it would come right up to me. 3 things in that night. The next morning we got to the breakfast table and our daughter Twyla said, you won't believe what I dreamed last night. I dreamed we moved to Jessup, Georgia.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anybody in the church. And we had never mentioned this around our children.
No.
We just winked at each other.
Yeah.
So the pastor that was sent in there, in 3 months, he was gone. So here it was again. And the overseer didn't consider my name at that point. And they voted on 3 different preachers to come. All 3 of them agreed to come and then changed their mind. So Brother Timmerman called me and he said, now Robert, I'm having a hard time filling that church down there. How do you feel about it? I said, Brother Timmerman, I still feel like I used to about it. He said, well, will you promise me that you'll move there and you will not leave as long as I'm overseer in this state? I said, I'll stay there as long as I physically can make it. So we moved, we were to move, and a group of the men came to me and said, we don't want you as your pastor, as our pastor. They gave 2 or 3 reasons, all of which are meaningless. But I told them, I said, well, I'm coming. God has spoke to me about it. And if you will allow me, I'll be the best pastor you've ever had as God helps me. And so we moved in under those circumstances. And of course we built all the new property. God just turned it around. But it was about a year before things turned spiritually. And I dreamed one night, you know, there was the parsonage was right next to the church in the old building. And I dreamed there was a swimming pool between the two. And that's where you always did your baptizing. And I wanted to have a baptizing, but I looked and that pool was full of old logs, all kind of debris. And all of a sudden a big wind blew there and cleaned it all out. And in my dream I said, now what in the world was that? God said it was just the Holy Ghost. If you would just let the Holy Ghost take care of it, He'll take care of it. And it turned
And it did be a great ministry.
Yeah.
We love the people there dearly.
But
We got
every place
calls.
we pastored in South Georgia, we were treated great.
Yes.
We made lifelong friends. Everywhere.
We just had a call this week from Fred Westbury. We've known him 65 years, we were pastor there. And
We met him at that first week after we married.
yeah.
He and his wife, they were at that church, and they'd been married 3 months, and we thought, boy, that's a
they've
long
been
time,
married
isn't
so
it?
long, you know. But every place has its beauties, and every place has added something to us that we needed. You know, it works both ways. You know, you give to them, but they also sow into your life.
I can look back and see I grew in different areas of my life at each place we were, but the growth was in a different area of my life.
You probably done the same thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
From there, we went to the state office in Tifton as evangelism director. And we had a good ministry there, organized a lot of churches. If you were to quote the number nowadays, people would think you were lying. You know, it's not happening like that nowadays.
I have a story about the first Sunday that I was out of my church. I was so lost and missed my church at Jessup so bad, and I just wanted to go home. You know, and we were going down. He said, we're going to set a church in order, as evangelism director that Sunday. And I kept seeing the pine trees just go by, and I was just crying. I was so upset. And I said to him, this is not a good thing to say to a pastor. You know, I said, honey, more than I need to hear you preach today, I feel like if I could just hear a good choir. You know, well, he was real silent. I mean, you know, bless his heart. So he said, I don't think you're going to hear a choir because they're in a little trailer, this church. And it was a black group that was coming into the church. So we got there in this trailer, and I was sitting on the front, and all of a sudden the black pastor said, and now our choir is coming to sing. And the back door of that trailer opened, and there were 3 most beautiful black women. I mean, the Brooklyn Tabernacle couldn't have touched them. They were great. And all they were doing, they were singing, and there was a little boy, and he had drumsticks, and he was beating on a metal chair, keeping rhythm for them. But I tell you what, I got my choir that day, and it sounded so beautiful, you know.
So after the state evangelism job, you were there for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
You went to Baxley.
Went to Baxley. Enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah,
Great people.
yeah.
There again, the church in Baxley, that time was the largest church of any denomination in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing at Jessup, same thing at Hazelhurst. And
They had the good fortune of having people call the Tomberlins there. And those folks were so solid. I mean, you know, they'll tell you exactly what they think, but, you know, they love you, and they were so sweet to us.
I had the honor of pastoring Earl Park Sr.
Yep, tell me.
And I thought going there, I said, oh, that scares me to death. I can't handle that.
Yeah.
And he's always on the front row, paying close attention to the sermons. But when I got there, usually Monday or Tuesday, he'd call me and comment 2 or 3 points about my sermon and tell me what a good job I was doing. Now that's a man that's been on the executive committee of the Church of God, one of the greatest pulpiteers in the denomination.
Yeah.
And he would find things to compliment me to build my spirits up. He'd call about, we had a daily radio program there, and he'd call me every once in a while to just brag on me, make me feel good.
But the big thing was he could have preached every funeral in that county. I mean, they loved him, and he came to him and he said, Brother Daugherty said, I don't really feel like I need to do that a lot now. I said, I'm getting older and maybe I don't remember as well. I said, so I'd like for you to kind of help take over some of those. But he would refer them to him, you know. And I thought, you know, this is a big, big heart, isn't it, you know?
He was the founding pastor of the Church
Yeah.
of God in Baxley.
A miracle.
He was preaching a tent meeting downtown in that little city, and they would come out every night and throw beer bottles and everything like that. And he couldn't get any police protection. But during that time, a child of the mayor got gravely ill. It wasn't getting any better. So some people took him over there to pray for him, and God healed that child and raised him up. From that night on, he had police protection as long as he was preaching that meeting.
And the crowds just came out. Another thing about that church that is so special, in their history, they were caught during the wartime. And so most of the men had to go to the service. And they were in the middle of building one of the first churches, I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway.
On Tippin Street.
Yeah, on Tippin Street. And so the women decided, we can do this. We can roof that place. We'll get up there and put a roof on it. They needed to dry it in. And they said that because they couldn't wear pants.
Well, they got old lumber given to them, and they would back the nails out
at night and then get up and roof that in the daytime. And they had, because of the pants thing, you know, wearing pants, they just put on their husbands' overalls and got up there and put the roof on that church. Can you imagine how great their reward is?
See, that's why those churches are growing.
Yeah, right.
So, because of the heritage
Yeah,
they had and the commitment of the early people.
yeah, yeah.
Of your years of pastoring, what's the single memory, the thing that you draw away from all your years of pastoring that you would want somebody to remember, to know
Mine
about?
is the relationship of a pastor and sheep. That is very, very strong, because in all the other positions we've held and been honored to have, there's none that equals that relationship, because like now when we go back to Jessup or any of those, we're Pastor Daugherty. You were with them during sicknesses and crisis and all, and the other, you know, no nice honors, but you're only good sometimes as your last decision.
I think a highlight that I remember,
Yeah.
that I'm gratified, is that I was able to pour in to young men whom God later called into ministry. Some are in leadership in our denomination now. I remember in Hazelhurst one year, I had 7 students out of that church at Lee. And in Hazelhurst community, back then, that rural area, not many people went to college. Not many graduated from high school. But when I saw that, and then I see what's happened to them where they've gone, and same thing in some of the other churches. That's very gratifying because I know the ministry is continuing, and that's very fulfilling to me.
I remember the day at camp meeting when I was ordained. You stood with me that day. You were the pastor at Baxley at the time, pastoring my family. We knew each other. And I remember being there, and you were on the state council. And I just remember you coming and standing with me, and you were the one who prayed for me that day. A wonderful memory.
One of the things since we've been in Cleveland, he's missed has been able to, to see young people, and like now on Sunday afternoon, our son will call, and he's calling because his dad wanted to know, did you get any new tithers today? He wants to know the state of the church, and he knows that. We had so many. We did this, we baptized Dad, and that report was good, and it carried over because he went to Lee to Dr. Daugherty's class, and it was expository preaching. And so some of the kids said, why are you doing that now? I mean, you've already done that, been there, got the t-shirt. But one of the students there in that class, that was a student, that had to do his practicum sermon, And Dr. Daugherty told him, said, you'll show up with a coat and a tie, and you'll have your shoes shined, and and so so this young man that sat by him next to him said, Pastor, would you be here with me when I do my sermon? And he said, yes, I'll be there. And so when he got there that morning, the young man met him at the door, and he said, Pastor, do I look all right? And he kind of choked up at his little tie there, and he said, I didn't have a coat. I got this nice coat at Goodwill. And it lets you know the caliber of some of the students there and what their purpose is going on.
So after Baxley, you went out as a state overseer?
Yes. Went to Louisiana.
A good appointment, very good.
And we loved it. We loved the food. It's just a great relationship.
We were there when they had the Swaggart fall. We had 12, 12?
I had 12 ordained men
That was in the...
that I had to help get placed
Yeah.
in the Church of God.
And from Louisiana, you went to...
Western North Carolina.
Right.
Western North Carolina, I was involved in several big lawsuits representing the church. And God just intervened for us.
Also the sale of the campground, which, was a big thing and consumed a lot of
It had to be sold because it was condemned.
Yeah, it was in the flight path of the
I
U.S.
remember
Air.
well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you could hear, the parsonage was where they dumped the fuel coming in, and then you could hear it heaving, what was it, Operation Storm, what was it?
Desert Storm.
Desert Storm. You could feel the house shaking as those planes,
Carrying out all of that military equipment.
military equipment also, yeah. But,
And then you went to South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Okay, so you went to Louisiana in what year?
I went to Louisiana in 86.
Okay, so for the next 12 years you were an overseer.
Yes.
And then you went to World Missions. And
that was a wonderful family to work in. It was a little bumpy getting there because we didn't know till the last day of the assembly where we were going to land up, So, but it couldn't have been a better, more enjoyable thing. And the thing about that is, I couldn't understand, that we're not actually doing ministry, but we're helping somebody else, the missionary. But I finally, the Lord revealed to me when I stepped into that church and I asked for them, there was just something about it, I wasn't ashamed to ask because that meant they didn't have to come in off the field. And, so it was a blessing. And many sweet people, let us come year to year, to come back to renew that.
Well, your purpose is to raise funds for the missionaries. So you don't have an opportunity to see people getting saved or filled with the Holy Ghost and all. And I was worried about that one time, and I talked to one of the missionaries. I said, "That's the most difficult thing I've got now." He said, "No, if you weren't doing that, look at all the souls getting saved on the mission field, but if you weren't doing that, they wouldn't be getting saved. They wouldn't have the opportunity to hear."
We all work together. We do our part,
Yeah,
don't we?
yeah.
Yeah.
So what year did you officially retire?
Was it?
I'm trying to remember.
Was it 2000?
I think about 2012, but I still stayed on as an associate.
No, we've been in missions 20 years. So. Well,
That's not what he asked.
oh, I'm sorry.
But you were semi-retired even when you were coming to Vidalia.
Yeah,
You were
Yeah,
semi-retired.
right.
so
I was
yeah.
an official field rep,
Associate.
associate field rep,
Yeah.
and that just ceased about a month or two ago.
So what have you guys been doing the last 5-6 years? What are you doing with your lives now?
Well, I've had a ministry at Life Care for 17 years, I think it is now, wasn't it? And just when the COVID hit, I couldn't go in anymore. I'm hoping we can get back. But it was kind of our version of the Gaither thing. You know, you just get around the piano and sing. And it's amazing how many of those old songs that they can sing with you and know. And there again, I've had some real funny experiences there, and sweet ones too. One day I had been trying to care for my mother, and it was just a weary day. That's the only way I know to describe it. And when I got there, I leaned my head over on the steering wheel, and I thought, I'm just so weary today. And I guess it was the devil that said, "Why don't you just sing the weariest song you know when you get in there?" And there was a song that my dad used to say, "I saw a wayward traveler, you know, with tattered garments clad. He was trudging up the mountain. It seemed like he was sad. His back was heavy laden and his strength was almost gone, but he journeyed on, you know." And I leaned into that thing really good, you know, and all of a sudden there was a little lady in the jerry chair, you know what that is. And anyway, she had not spoken in 4 years that they knew of. And when I stopped, I thought, "You reckon I ought to try to sing a little more of this?" You know. And when I stopped, she started singing in the clearest soprano voice I have ever heard. "And when this battle's over, I shall wear a crown." And you talk about getting beat up, the Lord really beat me up over that. You were going back to the mission thing. I was just going to share just quickly, because as I said, it was a bumpy road getting there. But we were here at the assembly, and everything we had was in a truck on the Budgetel parking lot. And I was not a happy camper. I thought, you know, after all these years, I ought to know where I'm going, you know. And so Bob said, "Well, tonight, while the missionaries are in for orientation, they're going to have communion and feet washing, and you ought to go." Well, I wasn't in the mood to go, but I went, and I got through communion fine. But when it came time to wash feet, I knelt down in front of Mary Frances Morris. I don't know if you know her. Anyway, and as I knelt down, just as clear as anything has ever been, it was all like of a sudden her feet turned to brass. There was a flash. And I was looking, and the Lord said to me in that moment, "Don't touch her feet." And I was just thinking, what did I just see? What is this? And the Lord spoke to me, and he said, "She's willing to go to Botswana for me. And you're not willing to be in Cleveland, Tennessee to see that she gets there." And that's when I promised him on my knees in front of her that as long as he would give us strength and everything, I'd do the best I could. And the Lord blessed us, gave us a great ministry and missions. But that was the moment that I understood what he thought about his missionaries. You know, I wasn't worthy. It's not being too proud. It was not being worthy enough to wash her feet.
It's a wonderful story. So what have you been doing, Brother Daugherty, the last few years?
Well, I told some of the people before we retired that we were going to move to Cleveland and spend all of our time driving each other back and forth to doctors.
We kind of been doing that. that.
I didn't know how prophetic that was. But I've been involved in several things here with Max Morris's citywide prayer meeting. I was involved in that until the COVID came in, and I would speak there quite a bit.
And the Focus, you were a leader in the
And I've
Focus.
spoken at Westmore a lot. I became a leader in Focus. Paul Duncan and I started a new class, and of people, none of whom went to church on Sunday nights. So we only had one person come that attended any other church service. So this was a new venture for the church, and spoke there quite a bit, taught different lessons.
He's also become the chaplain of his high school.
My high school graduating class in Chattanooga, 1953. I left the day after graduation. I did not see one of them until our 50th anniversary.
Wow.
And said when we moved back here, and they said, well, we meet once a month and we have a meal and relaxing and everything. So we started going to that. So I've been able to renew acquaintances with them. And so I become their chaplain, and I've preached several of their funerals already. And I've got several more that it made me promise I would preach their funerals.
And
You
these
know.
are Episcopal,
So God opened that door
Presbyterian, all kind
for
of,
me.
you know, faiths, you know, so that's been interesting, you know, and good, yeah.
So,
Just-
looking back, what's the one thing that stands out to you that you would want your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, great-greats who've not yet been born, that you would want them to know about Robert and Pat Daugherty?
I would want them to know that I lived to the best of my ability a sanctified life, that my trust and confidence was in the Lord, and that the only way they're going to make it to heaven is to accept Him and live for Him. And I trust that they'll follow my footsteps.
Much the same, that they would embrace our faith, and that I could, maybe before we pass on, that we could see evidence of them doing that, that, you know, that, like the song, I just wouldn't want my living to have been in vain. What my grandparents, they were not ignorant or unlearned people, they were not smart book learning, but they knew the Lord, they knew His power, they'd seen His healing, all of this. I'd like for them to be able to see the same thing through my life.
Brother and Sister Daugherty, thank you very much.
Love you.
Let me
Thank
say
you.
this for our 4 immediate children.
Yeah.
We're so proud of them. Our oldest, Robin, is secretary for Assistant General Overseer. Twyla, her husband, is Dean of School of Music at Lee. She teaches in the nursing school at Lee, and she just graduated last week with a master's degree in nursing from Xavier University. And then Adric has been on the staff of the church where he serves now. He's the administrative pastor. He's been there 31 years. And then Robert is teaching in Atlanta in the school and traveling, serving the Lord,
Mission
training
trips.
his daughters
Yeah,
to love the Lord.
yeah. So
And so I'm blessed,
we're blessed.
abundantly blessed.